Lately, every conversation seems to start the same way. Someone mentions the price of something that used to be affordable. Another laments the feelings of uncertainty when it comes to work. And another will just burst out and say, I really just don't know what's going on anymore. This is a very universal feeling, a very common feeling. You hear it across the continent when you travel the continent, you hear it across the world. It's a quiet feeling that things are changing faster than what we can fully understand. We have more information than we've ever had before, yet somehow there's less clarity about the future. So today I want to ask a simple question. Why does everything feel so uncertain right now? And the surprising part is, uncertainty today isn't coming from just one crisis, but from several quiet shifts that are happening all at once. I am Sebenzile Nkambule, and this is Context, where we slow down the headlines just enough to understand what they really mean. Before we talk about economics, politics, or technology, let's talk about the feeling. Across conversations that I'm having, at least, whether with young professionals, senior executives, students, entrepreneurs, hustlers, or even, highly experienced people well within their 60s, 70s, there's a shared mood that I keep hearing. People feel like the ground is shifting beneath them. You can be employed and still feel anxious. You can be successful and still be quite unsure. You can be informed and still feel lost about the state of affairs. But it isn't just that. It's also the impact of technology, how it's threatening careers, how it's introducing new opportunities as well. But the interesting part is that it isn't just one major event that's causing this level of uncertainty. You'll remember the COVID period, right? Where one evening you had the head of state stand before the country and say everything is being shut down. Some of it ridiculous, where you couldn't even buy clothing for toddlers who need new clothes every so often. It was a scary time. We lost friends, we lost loved ones due to the pandemic. But it isn't just one major event or perhaps even a war. It's no longer a threat of war where you are actually seeing the action of war. It's many other factors such as technology, the impact of AI, artificial intelligence, how it's threatening jobs, but also how it's creating new opportunities as well. If you have the requisite tools, the requisite skills to take them up, it's politics, it's the outcome of elections, and all of this is contributing to this feeling of uncertainty. So let's double click, right, and dial in on the economic anxiety that we are seeing, economic anxiety without collapse, which makes it interesting. Globally, we're told a number of economies are recovering, ours included, South Africa's economy included. Some markets are growing, technology investment continues, yet ordinary people still feel stretched, whether it's the cost of food, the cost of electricity or water, even as the broader macroeconomics, if you will, are looking up, their lived experiences, the individual experiences of people don't seem to be making a shift. Take, for instance, the hundreds, if not thousands, of young people, for example, who turned up for an opportunity in the army. This was just recently in Toyando, where the word was put out that there would be opportunities, and thousands of young people turned up for just a couple of spots to find work. If that doesn't tell you the times are tough, I don't know what else will. Across the continent and globally, we're looking at housing costs, for example, that are rising faster than what salaries are. Transport and energy costs eat into the income. The stable middle class life feels harder to maintain. And many people will feel that they've done everything right. Right? They've told us to save, we've saved. Plan for children, we've done that, but still feel incredibly stretched. Education, career, hard work, you name it. But the reward feels less predictable than what it did a generation ago. So uncertainty isn't just about unemployment, right? It's about the fear that stability itself is disappearing. And yes, there are various measures and so on. If you think about the social relief distress grants, it went a long way as a result of the COVID pandemic. But let's be honest, what can you really get with $370, is it these days? It's not much. It's not much. And yet, when you do listen to, whether it's the budget speech or when you listen to the State of the Nation address, or ministers who make comments such as...
The difference is that today, because there's a progressive government, people expect that government to go and give them jobs. They don't look for jobs. And that must change. I'm sure to be here in SABC yourself, you look for an advert, you applied, you got into SABC. Not the SAB looking for you. You looked for a job and you got employed. And people must begin to appreciate that you do queue up for a job, you get employed, adverts are not going to employ you. You will have to look for the advert and apply in real terms. If you don't do that, you're not going to be employed. And I'm going back to the point I made. Let's move out of being a passive society to be an active society.
That South Africans are lazy and aren't applying for jobs. It then really makes you wonder how it is that people are expected to make a living or to piece things together so that they're able to feed not only themselves, but those who are then dependent upon them. And this again gives you a sense of this feeling of uncertainty. And so you'll hear, whether it's the Minister of Finance or the President himself, being excited, right, about how the economy has improved, how, for example, jobless growth that we've seen for many years in the country has decreased, even though unemployment hasn't. You almost see them patting themselves on the back, and you wonder, if you are a 28-year-old who's never worked a day in their life in this country, what do you have to be proud of? Let's talk a bit about AI and the future of work, right? Technology, and in particular, artificial intelligence. For years, automation was something that we thought would affect factories first, right? The manufacturing sector. That it would be those spaces where you're manufacturing, I don't know, cell phones or laptops, you name it, that they would be affected first and the fastest. However, it's now affecting, think about the creative sector. Designers, writers, analysts, coders, even journalists are not spared the devastation really that AI in some respects has wrought. And we also know that there are other opportunities that it has created. Jobs once considered secure are suddenly being reimagined or have just become obsolete. And for young Africans entering the workforce at scale, this creates a profound question. Are we preparing for careers that may look completely different in 5 years' time? I think the answer to that is yes. However, AI is creating other opportunities as well. Plenty of opportunities. The question, though, remains, are we exposed and open to those new industries? Do we have access to these new tools, to these new ways of actually working across borders, which facilitates collaboration, partnerships, and increases productivity as well? So, in terms of this particular area that's leading and creating this uncertainty, we are living in a paradox. Technology is expanding possibility, while simultaneously it's creating fear. However, though, and important to underscore, uncertainty grows when opportunity and risk arrive together. And I wonder if as Africans we are wired like that, or becoming increasingly wired like that to take risks. I suppose when you think about if your options is to do something or to die, you are already taking that risk. I just hope it would be formalized a lot more within the ways in which we're taught, within the ways in which the education that we're exposed to, that we could in fact take on these opportunities and aren't being subjected to education or being educated about sectors or industries that may not even exist in 5 years or 10 years to come. Let's talk now about an area I'm particularly quite interested about, is political noise and instability, if you will. I think we're very fortunate, and we record in Johannesburg, South Africa. We're very fortunate that so far our elections have been relatively without instability. We haven't seen major unrest as a result of contested outcomes. Obviously, we know when you look at the local government elections, for example, the very worrying trend of councillors being killed, particularly leading up to a local government election, which is the case in 2026, is that you start hearing of very problematic cases of councillors being targeted. Provinces such as KwaZulu-Natal, for example, being one of those where, at least over the years, I think it has died down a bit. Oh, excuse the pun. Oh, that's a terrible pun. It has died down a bit because there has been the necessary interventions, right, to really stem this terrible and violent trend of councillors being targeted as a result of elections. So we must actually hold cross our fingers, if you will, right, and be grateful for the fact that we are still able to go to the polls, and as a voter, as the electorate, still feel that it is fair that we are in fact having a say and that people are being put in office in the right way. But as we've seen, though, right, you in other parts of the continent, and perhaps you may have some others who push back and say, maybe even here, the fact that you've got so many young people apathetic about the politics of the day. I remember actually I was at one of the retail stores, and I asked somebody, this was in 2024, when we were going into the general election. Young fellow who was serving me at the counter looked like he was 20, 21, had pretty cool blonde hair and so on. And I asked him, hey, we just voted. Did you bother to participate? He said, no, why? Why should I bother? These things are rigged, he said. And I said, but why do you say that? Do you have any evidence of that? He's like, no, I can't point to any data. But look at these guys. It's always the same ones. You can't trust them. So why should I bother to go out and have my say? It breaks one's heart to hear that sort of thing, but you understand where it actually comes from, because if you're living in a country where you feel as though every day it becomes harder and harder, the levels of uncertainty continue to be on the rise, why would you feel that standing in a queue somewhere, waiting to get some ink on your thumb and picking, right, amongst an option or a list of not the most exciting options, if we're being honest, right? People you don't even know, but you're just participating in the process. Why on earth would you feel like you can make any meaningful contribution that may shift change? Yet here's a fellow who has all sorts of information that is available to him, right? On his fingertips, but still feels that there isn't a point to it. He says that if you on social media, you follow certain people and so on, you actually realize that there's a lot that is not being clearly revealed or being told about what's happening behind the scenes, and it just wants no part of that. And sadly, there are many people who feel that way. And now that we've seen shifts as coalition governments, we've seen tight elections, contested elections as well. If you see elsewhere on the continent, you are seeing an increase in distrust in institutions, even with citizens being a lot more informed, a lot more connected, being able to call out a politician on the spot on Twitter. You can tag them when they've done something and they respond to you, at least if they care about being voted for, or somebody within their team, right, responds to you. You still don't trust that this is in fact something that you should participate in. And when political systems appear to be unstable or seemed to be untrustworthy, you then start seeing a situation where people begin to question their own long-term planning. Should I invest here? Should I migrate? Should I stay? Should I wait? Should I have children? Is this the place where I want to be? Uncertainty, the uncertainty factor within the political realm becomes a daily calculation for many people. Let's also throw in the point of the information overload, right? Where people, in fact, have access to information if they want to find out what's happening about the water crisis, if they want to find out about the cost of living or access to funding opportunities in university or wherever it might be, they still have a very particular perception about what is happening. And so it takes us to this point where we say it's no longer just about access to information, but in fact, there is an interpretation crisis, right? Where you're consuming headlines that are without context. You are listening to opinions from people without expertise, viral moments with zero explanation. You have WhatsApp messages that come in with zero effect. And I chuckle because if you have an elderly parent, and I suppose they don't even need to be elderly, But if you have an elderly parent, you've more than once have had to dispel a myth. You've had to dispel some or other nonsense that has come across a chain message that for some, and they target Abokoko. I think we should need to have a separate episode about this, about how vulnerable elderly people are in this information age without being adequately trained to discern between nonsense, outright BS, and what is actually factual, right? And so it helps that when they're able to call their children, and it's frustrating when you're like, no, ma, it's not happening. It's not happening. Disregard, delete that thing. I wish I could actually get her off some of those groups that she's on. But look, it's her mates, it's her former colleagues and all of that. But some work needs to be done around that, right? Because all sorts of nonsense is spread on these platforms, and this is how we actually access information. This is how we engage. This is how you share meaningful moments, but it's how you also just share information that matters. And probably more so than not, the information is useful. It's what you want to know. You find it on WhatsApp in the neighborhood group that there's no water, right? So you need to fill up quickly or buy water on your way home. It's helpful. But then every so often there's the nonsense that also does its rounds there. And sometimes I think we take that for granted, right? The fact that information is on our fingertips, we take for granted how destructive it can be when it's coming from untrusted sources, but from people who actually are set out to instill fear in people, especially when it's messages that come from people who are set out to put out disinformation into the world, to cause outrage in society for whatever gain, I wonder. So it's not that people don't care. In many instances, it's that people are actually quite overwhelmed, but are prone to actually following things that don't make sense or the wrong thing because it's so easily accessible. The last segment, if you will, to help us understand the moments that we're in, where there's such high levels of uncertainty, is the fact that we consume information often without context. And this is exactly why context, this platform, exists. It's not to add more noise. It's not to just add numbers to the many platforms and podcasts that exist out there, but rather it's to slow things down just enough to connect the dots, to ask, what is really changing in society? Who is affected? And how do we make sense of it together? Because uncertainty doesn't disappear when we have more information. It disappears when you and I have a better understanding. So, if you've been feeling uncertain lately about work, about the future, about the world, I'm here to say you are not alone. We're in this together. We are living through a period of transition. And over the coming episodes, you and I will unpack the forces that are shaping this moment, from identity and ambition to politics, culture, and the future of work. And I hope you will journey with us. I am Sebenzile Nkambule, and this is Context, because information is everywhere, but context changes everything. Follow the podcast wherever you listen, and I'll see you next week.